Lee Minho had been working the night shift at Luna Communications Station for 3 years, but nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his screen that Tuesday evening. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago as he monitored the usual background chatter of deep space communications. Then suddenly, his equipment started picking up something completely different. The signal was unlike anything in the databases. It wasn't the steady pulse of a navigation beacon or the structured data streams from mining operations. This was organic, almost musical, with harmonics that made his equipment vibrate in ways it wasn't designed to handle. Minho adjusted his headset and listened carefully as the translation software worked to decode the message. What he heard made his blood run cold. The beings calling themselves Zerathi were crying out for help. Their voices carried a desperation that needed no translation. Through broken fragments of universal language protocols, they painted a picture of absolute terror. Something called the Katera swarm was consuming their world, literally eating their cities and turning their people into organic matter for more ships. But then came the part that made Minho's hands shake as he reached for his emergency communication panel. The Zerathi message included a data packet about known galactic civilizations. In it, humanity was listed under a classification that made his stomach drop: Deathworlders. The file described Earth as a planet so hostile that its dominant species had evolved into natural killers, according to galactic records. Humans were considered too dangerous for contact by most civilized species. The Zerathi didn't know this. Their message was a general broadcast to anyone who might listen. They had no idea they were begging for help from the very beings the galaxy feared most. The irony wasn't lost on Minho as he watched his screen fill with more incoming distress signals. The crystalline beings were broadcasting continuously now, their musical voices growing more desperate with each transmission. Minho's training kicked in as he began recording everything and preparing to send it to Earth Command. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, but his mind was racing. For decades, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't, and they also knew that their reputation had preceded them among the stars. The Luna Station's deep space arrays were some of the most powerful ever built, capable of reaching into the far corners of human space in minutes. As Minho prepared to transmit the Zerathi distress call to every major military installation on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies, he realized this moment would change everything. Humanity was about to make first contact, not as explorers or diplomats, but as the galaxy's emergency response team. The transmission queue showed dozens of high-priority destinations: military command centers, research facilities, and government installations would all receive this information within the hour. Minho took a deep breath and initiated the broadcast, knowing that somewhere in those distant signals lay the screams of an entire civilization facing extinction. The elevator descended 15 floors below street level before Admiral Park Ji-ho stepped into the most secure military facility on Earth. The Seoul Defense Command War Room had been built to withstand nuclear strikes, but today it would host discussions about threats from beyond the solar system. The massive circular table could seat 50 officers, though only 12 had been called for this emergency session. Park Ji-ho had served in the Korean Space Navy for 28 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion to Mars and beyond. He had commanded ships in the asteroid belt conflicts and the Titan mining wars, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what lay spread across the holographic display above the table. The three-dimensional image showed a star system 400 light-years away, where an entire civilization was dying in real time. Commander Kim Da-yoon stood at the display controls, her usually calm demeanor cracked by the horror of what she was presenting. The intelligence reports had been streaming in for 6 hours since the Luna station first intercepted the Zerathi distress calls. Each update painted a darker picture than the last. The Katera swarm wasn't just another hostile alien species. They were something far worse. "The biological analysis is complete," Kim Da-yoon said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. These creatures don't just conquer worlds, they consume them entirely. Every building, every tree, every living being gets broken down into organic components and rebuilt into more ships for their fleet. She manipulated the display to show recordings captured from Zerathi survivors. The images were difficult to watch. Captain Choi Hyanwoo leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face grim. He commanded the Mars Defense Fleet, a collection of ships originally built to protect mining operations, but upgraded over the years into formidable warships. Admiral, we're looking at 17 dead civilizations, billions of lives lost. And now these Zerathi are next in line unless someone intervenes. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. General Lee Sang-min from Earth's Orbital Defense Command was the first to speak. The Zerathi don't even know what humans are. Their databases list us as Deathworlders, too dangerous for contact. They're asking for help from anyone who will listen, not knowing they've reached the species the galaxy fears most. Colonel Yoon Myung from Military Intelligence added her analysis. Based on Kithara attack patterns, the Zerathi homeworld has maybe 72 hours before complete consumption. Their defensive capabilities are sophisticated, but entirely inadequate against this level of biological warfare. The debate that followed was intense, but brief. Captain Choi argued passionately for immediate military response, pointing out that humanity had the largest and most advanced fleet in known space. Others worried about revealing human capabilities to a hostile galaxy. Admiral Park listened to every voice before making his decision. "We didn't ask to be called Deathworlders," he said finally. "But if that's what it takes to stop genocide on an interstellar scale, then we'll embrace the title." His words carried the weight of history. Within minutes, emergency broadcasts were racing across human space, calling every available warship. 2 rally points throughout the solar system, for the first time since leaving Earth. Humanity would go to war, not for resources or territory, but for the survival of complete strangers who lived among distant stars. Captain Lee Soo-jin stood on the bridge of the battleship Defender, watching something that had never happened before in human history. Through the massive viewing ports, space itself seemed to be coming alive as ship after ship emerged from hyperspace jumps. Each arrival sent ripples of blue energy across the darkness, and within hours, the empty space near Jupiter had become the largest gathering of human vessels ever assembled. The Defender had been Soo-jin's command for 8 years, a kilometer-long battleship designed to protect Earth's outer colonies from pirates and rebels. She had fought in border skirmishes and patrol actions, but never imagined her ship would be part of humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. Her crew of 400 was working around the clock, checking weapon systems and loading supplies, for what could be a journey into the unknown. Lieutenant Commander Park Dong-wook called out coordinates as another wave of ships appeared. "Ma'am, the Martian Defense Fleet has arrived. Count shows 37 heavy cruisers and 62 escorts." The Martian ships were built different from Earth vessels, longer and sleeker, designed for the harsh conditions of deep space mining operations. Their hulls bore the scars of countless asteroid impacts, but their weapons were as deadly as anything in human space. What amazed Soo-jin most was seeing ships she never expected to join a military operation. The Titan Mining Consortium had sent every vessel they could spare, massive industrial ships converted into makeshift warships. Plasma cutters meant for mining asteroids had been modified into ship-to-ship weapons. Cargo haulers now bristled with missile pods welded to their hulls. The crews manning these converted ships were miners and engineers, not soldiers, but they had volunteered anyway. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Communications Officer Kim Ha-young from her station. "We're getting registration pings from ships I didn't even know existed." The tactical display showed vessels from the Belt Patrol, the Europa Research Station, even modified civilian transports from the outer system colonies. Families who owned single-ship freight Operations had armed their vessels and joined the fleet. Then came the moment that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The flagship Retribution materialized in the center of the formation, its massive bulk making every other ship look small by comparison. At 2 kilometers long, it was the largest vessel ever built by human hands, a mobile fortress equipped with enough firepower to crack planets. Admiral Park Ji-ho's personal command, it had never been deployed outside the solar system. Chief Tactical Officer Lim Jae-hoon ran constant updates on fleet composition. Final count shows 1,237 vessels of all classes, from single-pilot fighters to the heavy carriers. Every major shipyard in human space has contributed something. He paused, checking his numbers again. Ma'am, this represents 60% of humanity's total naval capacity. Sujin felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Around her ship, the greatest armada in human history was forming up into battle groups. Engineers worked frantically to standardize communication protocols between ships that had never operated together. Supply vessels moved between the larger ships, distributing ammunition and spare parts. This wasn't just a military operation. It was humanity announcing itself to the galaxy, declaring that Earth's children would cross the void to protect strangers who had never heard of them before. The moment 1,200 human warships activated their hyperspace drives simultaneously, the space around Jupiter lit up like a miniature star. Captain Kim Ji-min felt the familiar sensation of reality bending as the destroyer. Swift strike punched through the barrier between normal space and the hyperspace tunnel that would carry them 400 light-years in 3 days. Around his ship, the entire human armada stretched out in a formation that had never been attempted before. Inside hyperspace, the view from the bridge was both beautiful and terrifying. Streams of blue and white energy flowed past the hull, like rivers of light, while the distorted images of nearby ships appeared and disappeared in the swirling chaos. Jimin had made this journey dozens of times in smaller formations, but seeing over 1,000 ships moving together through hyperspace was something that would stay with him forever. On the marine deck of the heavy cruiser Iron Will, Colonel Yoon Tae-ho stood before 300 soldiers who would be among the first humans to fight an alien enemy. The briefing room was packed with Marines from a dozen different worlds, their faces serious as they studied the holographic displays showing Cathora biology. These weren't the bug-like creatures from old science fiction movies. They were something far more disturbing. The Cathora are biological machines, Yoon explained, pointing to the twisted forms on the display. They start as small organisms, but quickly adapt to whatever environment they encounter. Within hours, they can modify their own bodies to become more effective killers. He switched to combat footage recovered from Zerathi survivors. They learned from every battle, sharing information instantly across their entire swarm through some kind of biological network. Sergeant Park Min-young raised her hand. "Sir, what happens if our weapons don't work?" The question everyone was thinking, but afraid to ask. Yoon's expression was grim. "Then we find new weapons." Marines have been adapting to impossible situations for centuries. That's not going to change now. Across the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. Dr. Shin Da-jin worked around the clock in the research lab aboard the science vessel Discovery, analyzing every piece of data the Zerg had transmitted about their enemies. Her team had identified 17 different Cathora variants, each specialized for different types of combat. Some were built for ship-to-ship warfare, others for ground assault, and some seemed designed purely for consuming organic matter. The adaptability is the real problem, she explained to her research team during their daily briefing. Every time the Zerathi found a weapon that worked, the Cathora evolved a defense within days. We need to hit them with everything at once, before they can adapt to our tactics. Captain Kim Ji-min found himself checking the fleet status displays every few hours. The formation was holding perfectly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that They were flying into something beyond their understanding. Humanity had fought wars for resources, territory, and ideology, but never for the survival of a species they had never met. The hyperspace journey gave everyone time to think, and that wasn't necessarily good. They were about to announce humanity's presence to a hostile galaxy, fighting creatures that had already destroyed 17 civilizations. If they failed, the Kythera might follow the human ships back to Earth. The transition from hyperspace to normal space always took a few seconds for the sensors to adjust, but when the tactical displays finally cleared, every human officer who saw them felt their blood turn cold. The Zerathi system spread before them like a vision of hell made real. What should have been a peaceful star system, with gleaming cities, was instead a feeding ground for horrors that defied description. Lieutenant Commander Osehan had seen combat footage from the worst battles in human history, but nothing had prepared him for what filled his sensor screens aboard the flagship Retribution. The planet below was still recognizable as a world, but barely. Massive crystalline structures that had once housed millions of Zerathi were being dissolved by writhing biomechanical constructs, the size of city blocks. These weren't buildings being destroyed by explosions or fire. They were being eaten, their very molecular structure broken down and reformed into something alien. "Admiral, sensor sweep complete." "Oh," Sehan reported, his voice tight with controlled horror. "I'm reading approximately 15,000 Kythera bioships in orbit, ranging from fighter-sized organisms to structures over 5 kilometers long." He paused, adjusting his instruments to get better readings. "Sir, some of these larger vessels appear to be growing in real time, using materials stripped from the planet's surface." Admiral Park Ji-ho stood at the center of the command bridge, watching the tactical display update with new horror every few seconds. The Kythera swarm moved like a living thing, individual ships flowing around each other in patterns that suggested a single controlling intelligence. They had surrounded the planet completely, creating a biological blockade that prevented any escape. "Communications. Open emergency channels on all frequencies," Park ordered. "Broadcast in every language we have. Let them know help has arrived." Within seconds, Communications Officer Kim Hae-won was transmitting on hundreds of different bands, using translation protocols developed during humanity's expansion into space. The response came faster than anyone expected. The speakers throughout the ship suddenly filled with sounds that were unlike anything in human experience. The Zerathi language was musical, like wind chimes made of crystal, but the emotion behind it needed no translation. These were voices filled with hope, desperation, and disbelief that someone had actually come. "Admiral, we're getting responses from over 3,000 small vessels," Kim Hae-won reported, her voice filled with amazement. "They're scattered throughout the outer system, hiding in asteroid fields and behind the moons. Most are civilian transports, packed with refugees." She listened to her headset for a moment. "Sir, they're asking if we're real. They can't believe anyone responded to their distress calls." Lieutenant Commander Park Sung-ho coordinated the sensor data coming from the entire fleet. "Sir, preliminary assessment shows the Kythera have consumed approximately 40% of the planet's major population centers. We're looking at billions of casualties. But there might be survivors in the southern continent, where the crystalline structures are more resistant to biological dissolution." The magnitude of what they were witnessing began to sink in across the human fleet. This wasn't a military conquest where one army defeated another. This was systematic extinction, the complete erasure of a civilization that had taken millions of years to develop. The Kythera weren't just killing the Zerathi. They were consuming everything they had ever built, every work of art, every monument, every trace that they had ever existed. But thousands of small refugee ships were still running, still hoping, still believing that somehow salvation had found them among the stars' communications. Officer Han So-young had spent years learning to decode signals from human colonies across the solar system, but nothing had prepared her for first contact with an alien species. The sounds filling her headset were unlike anything in her experience. The Zirathi language flowed like music, each word a combination of harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate through her entire body. Their translation computers were working overtime, but the emotion behind the alien voices needed no interpretation. "Admiral, I'm establishing stable communication with Refugee Fleet Commander Harmony of Stars," Han So-young reported from her station aboard the Retribution. The name itself was a rough translation of crystalline tones that her equipment could barely process. "They're transmitting tactical data about Kithra attack patterns, sir. Information they've learned through 6 months of running battles." The data that flowed through the communication channels painted a picture of desperate ingenuity. The Zirathi had been peaceful for thousands of years, their entire civilization built around art, science, and harmony with their crystalline world. When the Kithora arrived, they had no military to speak of, just mining ships and exploration vessels that they quickly converted into makeshift warships. Everything they knew about fighting these biomechanical horrors had been learned through bitter experience and terrible losses. Captain Lim Dongyin received a tactical briefing on his destroyer, Guardian, while simultaneously coordinating evacuation routes for the scattered refugee ships. The Zirathi survivors were hiding throughout the outer system, in asteroid fields, and behind the moons of gas giants, anywhere the Kithura bioships couldn't easily follow. Many were damaged, their crystalline hulls cracked from running battles with Kithura scouts. "Sir, the refugees are sharing targeting data," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Jae-soon. "They've identified vulnerability points in Kithura. Bioarmor, places where concentrated fire can penetrate their adaptive defenses. But they warn that the creatures learn quickly. Any tactic that works more than once becomes useless." Ensign Park Hyjin worked frantically at her weapons console, trying to process the flood of tactical information coming from the Zirathi survivors. The alien data was complex, showing how Kithra bioships could literally reshape themselves mid-battle, growing new armor plating or weapon systems in response to whatever attacked them. But the Zirathi had discovered something crucial during their months of desperate fighting. "The bioships share information through some kind of organic network," she explained to Captain Lim. "If we can disrupt their communication, they can't adapt as quickly. The Zirathi suggest hitting them with multiple different weapon types simultaneously, faster than they can process and counter." What amazed the human officers most was the Zirathi reaction to their arrival. Through the translated communications, they could hear the wonder in alien voices as they realized who had come to help them. The galaxy's most feared Deathworlders, the species every civilized race avoided, had crossed hundreds of light years to fight for strangers. The first wave of Kithra scouts was already moving toward the human fleet. Bioships that resembled twisted combinations of insect and machine. They flowed through space like living things, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been communication or preparation for battle. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," came the voice over fleet communications. "The Zirathi have given us everything they know about these creatures. Now it's time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do when we're fighting for something besides ourselves." The battle began with a silence that felt wrong in the vacuum of space. Commander Kong Menesio watched from the cockpit of her fighter as 1,200 human warships spread into attack formation, their weapon systems charging with energy that made space itself shimmer. The Kithra bioships responded by flowing toward them like a living tide, their organic hulls pulsing with patterns of light that seemed almost hypnotic. "All squadrons, remember the briefing," Kong transmitted to her wing commanders. "Hit them fast, hit them different, and never use the same attack pattern twice." Her fighter squadron had trained for this moment during the 3-day hyperspace journey, studying Zirathi tactical data until they could identify Kithora weak points in their sleep. The first exchange of fire lit up the space between the two fleets. Human railguns sent streams of metallic projectiles at incredible velocity, punching through bioarmor that had previously seemed impenetrable. But even as the Cthulhu ships took damage, their hulls began to shift and change, growing thicker armor plates where the impacts had occurred. Captain Cho Yun-bai commanded a squadron of destroyers that had been specifically tasked with preventing Cthulhu regrouping. The bioships had a disturbing tendency to merge together when damaged, combining their remaining mass into larger, more dangerous forms. Target the junction points, she ordered her weapons officers. Don't let them link up. Her ships moved with precision that would have impressed any military academy instructor. Each destroyer focused on different targets, using plasma cannons to sever the organic connections between bioships. When the Cthulhu began adapting heat-resistant armor, the destroyers immediately switched to kinetic weapons. When they adapted to those, the ships deployed experimental sonic disruptors that the creatures had never encountered before. The flagship Retribution dominated the center of the battlefield like a mobile fortress. Its massive railguns fired continuously, each shot sending projectiles the size of small cars through formations of bioships. Admiral Park Ji-ho stood on the bridge watching tactical displays that updated faster than human eyes could follow, coordinating attacks across hundreds of ships simultaneously. "Sir, the Cthulhu are trying to adapt to our railgun impacts," reported Lieutenant Commander Oh Se-hun. Their growing crystalline armor plating, similar to Zerathi technology, switched to plasma bombardment, full intensity. Park ordered without hesitation. Make them adapt to something completely different. The human fleet's greatest advantage wasn't their weapons or their ships. It was their ability to coordinate chaos. While the Cthulhu operated as a single organism, sharing information instantly, they could only adapt to threats they understood. The humans threw everything at them at once, creating a storm of different weapon types, tactics, and attack patterns that overwhelmed the bioships' ability to process and counter. Fighter squadrons led by Commander Kong darted between the larger ships, targeting the Cthulhu nursery vessels that were constantly producing new These massive organic structures were like floating factories, but they were also vulnerable to precision strikes. Each nursery destroyed meant hundreds of potential bioships that would never be born. Pilot Lee Tae-young scored the first direct hit on a nursery ship's core, watching in satisfaction as the entire structure convulsed and began breaking apart. "That's for the Zerathi cities," he muttered, already turning toward his next target. The battle that the Cthulhu expected to win through adaptation and overwhelming numbers instead became a demonstration of human warfare at its most lethal. The drop pods hit the Zerathi homeworld's surface like meteors, their reinforced hulls designed to punch through atmosphere and deliver human marines directly into combat zones. Major Song Jinwoo was among the first to emerge from his pod, stepping onto crystalline ground that crunched beneath his boots like broken glass. Around him, the remains of what had once been a beautiful city stretched to the horizon, its towering spires now twisted into organic nightmares by Cthulhu infestation. "First and third companies, establish perimeter," Song ordered through his helmet communicator. "Second company, begin systematic sweep of the Eastern District. Remember, we're not just clearing hostiles, we're preventing regeneration." The Marines spread out in practiced formations, their armor sensors constantly scanning for biological signatures that might indicate surviving Cthulhu organisms. The work was unlike anything in human military history. This wasn't a battle against soldiers or even dangerous animals. The Cthulhu infestation had turned the entire city into a living organism, with organic tendrils running through buildings like veins and pulsing nodes that might sprout into new bioconstructs at any moment. Every surface had to be examined, every structure cleared, every potential hiding spot burned clean. Sergeant Park Woo-jin led his squad through what had once been a Zerathi residential area. The crystalline homes were partially dissolved, their walls flowing like melted wax, where Cathora organisms had begun converting them into bioship components. "Contact front," he called out, as his motion sensors detected movement. 3 bioconstructs the size of large dogs emerged from a damaged building, their multiple limbs clicking against the crystal floor. The engagement was brief, but intense. Human plasma rifles fired concentrated energy beams that literally cooked the organic creatures from the inside out. But even as they died, the bioconstructs released spores that immediately began seeking new host material to infect. That's where the flamethrowers came in, burning away every trace of Kithra biological matter. Metacorporal Kim Haewon worked in the designated safe zones, where surviving Zerathi civilians had been gathered. The crystalline beings were unlike anything she had trained for. Their bodies composed of living mineral structures that resonated with harmonic frequencies when they spoke. Many were injured, their crystal formations cracked or partially dissolved by Kithara biological acids. "The medical scanner can't get proper readings," she reported to Major Song. "Their physiology is completely different from anything in our databases, but I think the standard field dressings are helping seal the cracks in their crystal structure." She watched as a young Zerathi, barely larger than a human child, hummed soft musical tones that seemed to help its natural healing processes. Demolition expert Sergeant Lee Young-ho had perhaps the most important job of all. Any building that showed signs of deep Kithara infestation had to be completely destroyed, reduced to rubble that could be properly sterilized. His team moved through the city with industrial-grade plasma charges, carefully placing explosives to bring down structures that could never be safely cleaned. "This residential tower is compromised all the way to the foundation," he reported, studying readings from his biological scanners. "The entire structure has been partially converted into bioship hull material. We'll need to take it down and burn the debris." The Zerathi survivors watched these operations with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. They had expected their rescuers to simply drive away the Cathora and leave. Instead, these Deathworlders were systematically ensuring that the biological nightmare could never return, working with a thoroughness that bordered on obsession. 3 weeks after the last Kithara bioconstruct had been eliminated from the Zerathi homeworld, something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations that had been silent for centuries suddenly came alive with transmissions, all of them directed toward one specific region of space, where a small yellow star harbored the homeworld of the species once known as Deathworlders. Admiral Park Ji-ho stood in the temporary command center established in the ruins of the Zerathi capital city, watching his communications officers struggle to process the flood of incoming messages. The crystalline spires around them were slowly being rebuilt, their musical resonance growing stronger each day as more Zerathi refugees returned home. But it was the signals from distant stars that truly amazed him. "Sir, we're receiving formal requests for assistance from 47 different systems," reported Communications Officer Han So-young, her voice filled with wonder. "The Trilaxian Confederation is asking for help with something called the Void Hunters. The Meridian Republic wants protection from biomechanical pirates. Even the isolationist Quantum Collective is requesting a defensive alliance." The transformation had been remarkable to witness. When human ships first arrived in the Zerathi system, they had been treated with fear and suspicion by the galactic monitoring networks. The reputation of Earth's children as dangerous Deathworlders had preceded them across hundreds of light, but now, after seeing what humanity had done for a species they had never met, that fear was being replaced by something else entirely. Elder Resonance of Hope approached the human command center with the flowing grace that characterized her species. The Zerathi leader's crystalline form caught and reflected the light from the reconstruction efforts around them, creating patterns that were both beautiful and somehow musical. Her words, translated through harmonic frequencies, carried formal weight that even the universal translators couldn't fully capture? Admiral Park of the Human Alliance, she began, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Zarathi Harmonic Council extends an offer of permanent alliance. Our crystal technology, our knowledge of galactic trade routes, our diplomatic connections with peaceful species, all of this we offer in exchange for the protection you have already proven willing to provide. Park found himself making a decision that would alter the course of human history. Earth had sent him to rescue a dying civilization, but he was returning with something far more significant, humanity's first alien ally, and a gateway into galactic politics that could reshape everything. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I accept your alliance, he replied formally. But we ask for more than technology or trade routes. We want to learn about the galaxy we're now part of, to understand the threats that face peaceful civilizations, and to build something better than what existed before. Lieutenant Commander Kim Jae-won handled the practical aspects of establishing the alliance, coordinating between human and Zarathi officials to set up communication protocols, technology sharing agreements, and mutual defense pacts. But the real significance went far beyond paperwork and treaties. Captain Lee Min-yoon, commanding the patrol ship Horizon, intercepted a transmission that showed just how much had changed. The message came from a species called the Vellani, whose homeworld was under attack by raiders using stolen Kithra technology. But instead of broadcasting a general distress call, they had specifically requested help from the humans of Earth, the Deathworlders, who had saved the Zarathi. Within days, similar requests arrived from across the galaxy. Species that had once avoided human space now actively sought contact with Earth's representatives.